Hello and welcome to Tech Deal's overview of the entire 8th generation Coffee Lake family, motherboards and CPUs included. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 4 different chipsets available, make specific recommendations on which ones I think are worth buying and which ones should be skipped. I'm going to talk about all of the various Coffee Lake CPUs, including the newly released ones. Yes, there are a couple ones that were just released in April of 2018. And then I'm going to compare it briefly to Ryzen. Now, in a couple of weeks' time from when this video is published, Ryzen 2 is launching, and when that comes out, I will do a comparison video between Ryzen and Intel. But for now, those are still a few weeks out, so I'm going to be just talking about Intel today. The first thing I want to talk about is the new motherboards that have launched. Now, last year in October of 2017, the Z370 series launched with the first batch of CPUs. We now have 3 more chipsets to go with it. I did a launch review on the B360. I'll link to that down in the video description below, but this is more of a comparison rather than a detail of the specific launch and that chipset. We have on the very low end the H310 chipset. Then we've got the B360, the H370, and then of course the aforementioned Z370. They simply go in that order. Let me make this really simple. For like 99% of you, it's either the Z370 or the B360 that you want. Ignore the 2H boards. The H310 is primarily designed for system builders and OEMs who cost is everything. It is only about $5 or $10 less expensive than the B360, and frankly, for an individual buyer, that really doesn't matter. You give up a ton of features for that. Skip the H310s. It makes a difference for Acer when they're building 1 million computers and saving $5 is millions of dollars, but you should skip that and go with the B360 at a minimum. The H370 has the same problem, but sort of the other way around. It is so close in price to the Z370 that if you want more than the B boards give you, just get a Z370. When I filmed this video, there was only a $10 price difference between the least expensive H370 and the least expensive Z370, which, by the way, are the boards that you're looking at here. These are all about or really close to the least expensive boards in their chipsets. So with only a $10 price difference, just get a Z board because it does have some extra features, and for $10 by the time you build your system, I think it's worth the money. I will come back to the motherboards in just a second and get a little bit more into the details on those, but I want to talk about the CPUs for a minute. In October of last year, 6 CPU SKUs were launched: 2 i3s, 2 i5s, and 2 i7s, 1 K and 1 non-K chip of each. The K chip is an overclockable chip. The multiplier is unlocked, and when installed on a Z series board, none of these others are overclockable, only Z boards will let you overclock, then you can adjust the multiplier and run them as fast as your cooling and the chip will actually allow. How fast that is depends upon your cooling and something called the silicon lottery, basically luck of the draw. Did you get a good chip or a not so good chip? But putting that issue aside, out of the box the K chips are faster and cost more. But these days the price difference is pretty minor. An i7-8700 is running $300 on Amazon, an i7-8700K is running $330. It's 10% more, but it does run faster out of the box and it's unlocked, and frankly, if you're going to go ahead and buy a $300 CPU, I would get the K chip at this point. There was a $70 price difference at one point closer to launch where I kind of thought the 8700 might make sense if you watch my original launch videos, but now that there's only a $30 price difference, get the K chip. Coming down to the i3 and i5, there's various chips there, which I'll talk about in a minute when I get into a detailed comparison, but I would like to note new CPUs have launched here. Now, low-power chips with a T identifier after them have launched, but for the average desktop builder, those aren't important. Those are for system integrators and large OEMs. They have launched some mid-range chips, an i5 8500 and an i5 8600. Those are non-K chips. Are they worth buying? Not really. I mean, if you find a deal, if they're only $5 or $10 more, sure. The performance difference between the 84, 85, and 8600 i5s is virtually non-existent. Benchmarks will show a few percentage points difference, but because they're all locked and they're only a couple hundred megahertz apart, it really is minor. An i3 8300 is also launched, but again, same thing. It is 100 megahertz faster than the 8100, costs more, and you'll never notice 100 megahertz difference, so don't bother. The value is honestly the chips that launched back at the original launch. One very important point to note is that the number of cores and threads on these CPUs has dramatically changed from the previous generations. 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, third and second generation chips were all more or less the same with minor speed bumps between them, but this time is different. And if you have one of those and you're thinking of upgrading, it's worth noting that the older i3s were 2-core, 4-thread processors. The new i3s are 4-core, 4-thread processors. They've dropped the hyperthreading but made them true quad-core chips. To put it another way, the i3-8100 is more or less the previous generation i5-7400. You're basically getting an i5 for an i3 price now. Now, the new i5s are in fact completely new. The previous i5s were 4 cores, 4 threads. The new ones are 6 cores, 6 threads. They're not hyper-threaded just like the previous chips, but they have gotten a 50% core increase to 6 cores. That's a big deal, especially if you want to live stream or do content creation or simply have a little bit more future-proof performance. The extra 2 cores will make a difference multitasking and in future games. A lot of games really don't need a 6-core yet, but it's getting there. And then finally, we have the i7 8700 and 8700K, which are 6-core, 12-thread processors. This is a 50% increase in core count and a 50% increase in thread count over the previous generation, which the i7 7700K was 4 cores, 8 threads. This is 6 cores, 12 threads. That's a big deal. If you're looking for a top-of-the-line machine, if you're looking for the best gaming performance around, the i7 8700K is pretty much it. At least maybe for a couple weeks till Ryzen 7 2700X launches. We will test that and see how well it does. However, it is worth noting that you do pay for that because the processor is $330 for the K chip. It does not come with a cooler. You need to give it a pretty good cooler if you want to overclock it. It does require a Z board, and if you want to take it to 5 gigahertz, which in my experience is not that hard to do, you're going to be spending $600 between board, CPU, and a decent cooler to do it. A little $30 cooler or a $50 cooler is not going to cut it. You're going to be spending $100 or more on a decent cooler, and I would not use that board to go to 5 gigahertz. You could, but no, you need something in the $150 to $200 range. Compare that to the price of, say, an i5 8400 or perhaps Ryzen 5 1600 or Ryzen 7 1700. This is faster, but it's expensive. Now that's a basic overview of the CPUs, or at least most of them. There's a few other models in there not worth talking about. Let's get back to the motherboards. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that the H310 is not worth considering. It is missing USB ports, it is missing expandability. Most importantly, it's missing PCI Express 3.0 to the chipset. It still has PCI Express 2.0 on it. I kid you not. It is missing so many internal features, HSIO lanes and other things. Just skip it. Please, if you are custom building a machine, you are doing yourself a disservice to even consider that board. The few dollars saved is not remotely worth it. I understand people go, well, I'll save some money. Just don't. Now, the B360 is actually a good board, and for many people, I do think it's a wise choice, unless you buy Ryzen, but we'll talk about that in a minute. If you want to go Intel, if you've just come to this video going, look, I want to buy an Intel chip, I'm happy with Intel, I don't want to mess around with AMD, I've used Intel for years and I'm happy with it, great. The i5 8400 paired with a B360 board, and in this case, I would recommend this board. This is a $70 motherboard. It's a reasonably priced board. Combine that board with that chip, you're looking at $250 for 6 cores, 6 threads, 3.8 gigahertz all-core turbo speed. Yes, I know it says up to 4, but it doesn't do 4 on all the cores, but it will do 3.8 out of the box on all the cores. And the included stock cooler, while not great, is good enough to do that. And I have tested that with stress testing. Not just playing a game or running a couple programs, but putting it under full load on all the cores and all the threads, the RAM and everything. The stock cooler on the i5 8400 is enough. Now, you can buy more motherboard, but once you spend more than $70, you're starting to creep into this price category because the Z370 I have here on the desk is a $100 motherboard. There is, in fact, only a $30 price difference between the B360 you see here and the Z370. And that Z370 has better audio, has better expansion, has more everything on it. Now, it's not SLI capable because it's a very low-end board. You have to spend about $20 or $30 more to get one, but I don't recommend SLI anyway. And it doesn't have the best VRMs, the voltage regulators, and power delivery. So if you want to go to 5 gigahertz on a top-end chip, I'd buy more board as well. But it does have more HSIO lanes, high-speed input-output lanes. It does have more PCI Express lanes. It has more USB ports, more expandability. And if you're on the fence trying to decide, well, for future upgradability or maybe just extra expansion options, is it worth it? Possibly. $30 separates these two. It's worth considering. Any CPU over an i5-8400, get a Z370. i7-8700 or any of the other i5s or, well, even any of the K chips, Z370. Frankly, the only CPU I would honestly recommend with the B board is the i5-8400. Now, you may notice that I don't mention the i3-8100. To be blunt, I don't think anybody should buy one. It is a 4-core, 4-thread chip, and those have been around for years, and frankly, a 3 or 4-year-old i5 chip locked is going to be very similar, not as fast, but very similar in performance. If you have an i5 4440 or 4460 4th gen Haswell chip, is the i3-8100 faster? Yes. Will you notice it? Maybe a little bit. You need a new board, you need new RAM, you need a new CPU to get 20% more performance. And by the way, that's 20% more CPU performance, not 20% more gaming performance, because that's mostly your graphics card. That is a complete waste of money. I really don't recommend the i3 line, to be honest with you. It's the i5-8400 for mid-level budget buyers, unless Ryzen, or frankly, the i7s. Coming back to the H370, I told you before, I don't recommend it either. Now, I will give each of these boards a detailed look on individual videos, but I really don't recommend it. And the simple reason is $70, $90, $100. 12 chipset PCI Express 3.0 lanes, 20 chipset PCI Express 3.0 lanes, 24 chipset PCI Express 3.0 lanes. This has nothing to do with the graphics card. Each of these boards gives 16 lanes to the graphics card. That's the chipset. But other features such as USB ports and HSIO lanes are also reduced between them. But once you're reduced down to a $90 price difference, and feature-wise, these boards are very similar, there is no reason in the world, in my opinion, to spend $90 on that when that exists for $100. Even if you're thinking, well, maybe I'll do an i5-8400, in which case I'd say we'll get a B360. But if for whatever reason you want the extra features of this, just get the Z370. Intel has released 4 different chipsets, and frankly, I think it is 2 chipsets too many. 2 chipsets would be absolutely plenty. Speaking of the Z370, frankly, Z370 and i7-8700K were meant for each other. The i7-8700K has been covered extensively, so I won't talk about it too much except to say that with a large $90 tower cooler such as an Artua D15 or a DarkRock Pro 3 or a 280mm or 360mm liquid cooler, 5 gigahertz should not be hard to obtain. I have had 3 different i7-8700Ks. All of them hit 5 gigahertz with no AVX offset without a problem, but not on that board. $150 to $200 boards is what you want to be looking at. This is here to provide you an example of why the H370 is kind of pointless. If you're going with an i7-8700K and you're going with a good quality cooler, do yourself a favor. The $150 Gigabyte Ultra Gaming Z370, it has better power delivery, it has better audio, it has SLI support, it has more expansion ports, more USB ports. It's just got better features all the way around. The savings of $50 when you're going to a top-end super premium system like an 8700K and you might be overclocking it, don't cheap out on your motherboard. This motherboard would be a great solution, for example, for the i3-8350K, if I can say that with a straight face. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that either. What about the i5-8600K? I have not covered that extensively on my channel. You can see one in the middle. I have one. Would I buy one? No. In fact, let me give you a specific recommendation not to. The price isn't too bad. It's under $250. The problem is if you're going middle of the road, you're going with a mid-level board, you're going with the mid-level chip, well, to be completely honest with you, I'd buy a Ryzen before I do that. And that brings me to the topic of Ryzen. Now, the current Ryzen chips are awesome, and there are some amazing sales and deals going on in the month of April for the retailers to clear out the inventory of the 1X chips because Ryzen 2 is launching, I believe, April 19th. I will have a full review on it. I will do performance comparisons here. But let me just say this. If you care about performance and you want the best, it's i7-8700K or bust. If you want the best value for the money, To be completely honest with you, it isn't anything on the desk here. It's probably going to be Ryzen 5 2600X when that launches. It comes with a RaceSpire cooler. It's going to have turbo speeds above 4 gigahertz for the first time, which will be nice. The new B450 and X370 boards are coming, which will have better RAM support, and frankly, it'll be a more developed platform because they've had a year to work on it, and even the original launch platforms, the CPUs and the motherboards have gotten better. They've done a lot of BIOS updates over the past year. I've been very, very happy with my multiple Ryzen machines. But I understand that many people like Intel, or for whatever reason you have a program that just runs better on Intel. MMOs, I'm looking at you. If you're a player of World of Warcraft or Star Wars The Old Republic, they do run better on Intel. The truth of the matter is they're very old game engines that were optimized for it, and some games and some programs just work better on Intel. And if you want the best, you're looking at it, 8700K. Now, linked down in the video description below is going to be a bunch of links, but at the very top of the description, I'm going to put my two primary Intel recommendations. Number one, i5-8400 combined with this B360 motherboard. If you want the most cost-effective solution for a reasonable price, that's the combination for Intel. If you want premium, the i7-8700K combined with at least, not this board, the Ultra Gaming from Gigabyte or a similar $150 board. It could be the killer SLI board from ASRock, for example. It could be the Prime board from Asus. It doesn't really matter which brand you go. It's sort of the price point sort of picks what features you get. They're pretty similar within that. You can spend more, you get more features, you don't get more performance, but at least $150 Z370 board and either one of the $90 large tower coolers or a 280 millimeter liquid cooler, and that's sort of the Cadillac option. Otherwise, it's Ryzen. And beneath that, I'll put the links to everything else just so you can check them out if you would like. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below. Questions and comments in the comment section. And as always, links, video description, they help the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.